I'm Marcus Rosano. I'm the Director of Media and Public Relations here at Montgomery College. A lot of the messages that come out to you, whether it be good or bad, come from my office. So you probably know me a lot better than you think you do. Also up here today on our panel is going to be Director Sean Harrison, and Director Harrison is the Director of the Office of Public Safety and Emergency Management here at Montgomery College. She's our top cop. And my other friend over there is Carlos Sanchez. He's the Chief Training Officer here. A lot of you have already heard of active shooter training. I know that as staff we're required to get active shooter training, and Carlo is, not only is he a delegate, but he's a very, very qualified person when it comes to training for emergency management. So let's just jump right into our presentation, and I'm going to ask Director Harrison to just come up and say a few words about what she does and what her office does.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks, Marcus. Marcus and I are joined at the hip quite often when an emergency situation occurs. Thank goodness our offices are right down the hall from each other. As the Director of Public Safety and Emergency Management, it is my role, my job, to make sure that each and every one of you are safe and secure on our campus each and every day, 365 days a year, 7 days a week, you name it, we are here. One of the things I want to share with you is that as a public safety official, I implore you all to be safety conscious on campus, at home, and in your everyday travels. Your personal actions can help maintain our campus as desirable places to work and to learn. Each individual, whether faculty, staff, or student, plays a role in creating a safe environment. As our partners, we ask that you assist us by reporting suspicious activities. If you hear something, report it to a public safety officer. Please have the public safety phone numbers programmed into your phones for emergencies. How many of you have one campus office, one public safety office number in your phone? 3 people out of this room. Shame on you. Shame, shame, shame. Please do that. Our campus makes note of where the campus blue light phones are, and take precautions when walking around. Again, this is a cliche to many, but it's very serious to us. If you see something, say something, whether it's some individuals that look strange, whether it's an incident on a parking lot, whether in your classroom, if it doesn't feel good, you have a weird feeling about it, let somebody know. Let us investigate. How many of you are signed up on MC Alerts? Good. Please make sure you take the opportunity to do that, because that's how you get your information. Yesterday, there was an incident at the Ohio State University, correct? How did that information travel around that campus so quickly? What did you hear on the news? What did you hear? Buckeye Alert. Buckeye Alert. Buckeye Alert. They put that message out in a minute, within a minute of that incident. That's what we're trying to do here. We get our messages out, there's a delay in some of them. We're working very diligently to get a system in here that gets our messages out within a minute, and to avoid some of the things that come out on social media that are not true or fact-based. For example, the big thing, or the big news message yesterday was that it was what? It was a shooting on the campus, correct? That's what somebody tweeted. Was that true? No, what was it? It was a stabbing. And prior to that, it was what? A vehicular incident. So we here at Montgomery College want to make a big effort to get ahead of social media so you get the facts straight. How many of you know what a lockdown is? Good. Shelter in place. We're going to talk about that a little later. But part of their message yesterday was just that. They were telling the students to shelter in place. They were telling the students to lock down. And one of the things I saw that in one particular classroom, the students and faculty had actually barricaded the door to their room. And that's a part of the message that we give out on Run, Hide, and Fight. Members of the Department of Public Safety, again, are available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If you feel as though you need an escort to your vehicle, don't hesitate to pick up the phone, call the office, and tell them, you're uncomfortable, would you escort me to your car? And somebody will respond to do that. And I'm going to say this as the Director of Public Safety, if you get a negative response in that regard, please let me know. Okay? In the very near future, I'm going to be putting out a public safety newsletter, maybe 3 times a year, 2-3 times a year, to keep you informed on things. I send you out communications about once a month, every other month, depending upon the campus trends. And I think it's important that you all know what the Department of Public Safety is all about. One other thing I want to mention, have you noticed the uniforms on the officers? Yes? Look good? Do you know one when you see one? All right, good. That's very important to me. So I'm going to shut my mouth, go have a seat. As the Director of Public Safety, please feel free to call me at any time, email me. I will respond back with your security questions. Okay? Thank you.
This is the first forum that we've held that we've gotten applause. That's fantastic. Okay, now it's my turn to talk communications. So, we have had some incidents in the past, I would say in the past 6 or so months. One of them in particular, as Sean mentioned, it was lockdown. How many of you remember either receiving an alert or hearing word of mouth or receiving an email that said the college is in lockdown? It happened last May, so you had to be here. What we do when we communicate in the time of emergency is, well, we do a lot of things. Sometimes we do too many things. But what we really need you to do is to become subscribed to what's called Montgomery College Alert. Montgomery College Alert is an instant text message that comes right to your phone. And I know that most students around here are attached to their phones, but they're not always attached to their emails, and they're attached to their text systems more often than not. So the first option when it comes to communication during an emergency is obviously MC Alert. You can go onto our website, go onto the emergency page on our website, and you can click in a couple of minutes, you will have MC Alert. It is a foolproof way to know if something is going on. And there's some good things that happen on MC Alert. At 4:30 in the morning in February, when there's 6 inches of snow on the ground, we're going to send an alert to you, and we're going to say you can stay in bed because you don't have to come to school because it's closed. So there's a positive and a negative. Now, when I say that there's a negative, when emergencies happen, whether it be a lockdown, it could be an active shooter, it could be a shelter in place. For instance, a few years ago, we actually had a tornado cell that really was making a beeline right to the Rockville campus. And one of our old friends that we used to work with here, Mr. Maloney, was following this thing on one of the radar systems of the weather, and it quite literally went right down Manatee Street, took down some power lines. There was a young lady who was actually trapped in her car in between power lines. So what we did is we sent out an alert, said, hey, stay in, shelter in place. If there is a storm coming, and it should be blowing through here within the next 10 or 15 minutes, but for the time being, don't go anywhere, shelter in place. So signing up to MC Alert is very important, and it's immediate, it's foolproof, and everybody's attached to their phone, so you're going to get a text message. Second, there is MC Urgent emails. Does everybody get things from MC Urgent on their Outlook? MC Urgent is, it comes from our office. There are some things that will come out that are quite often crime alerts. You'll see those. If there is an immediate crime in the area, we'll send out an MC Urgent. One of the things about MC Urgent is you're also going to get your text message, but this is just another mechanism for us to communicate in times of emergency. I know that not everybody is going to be on their Outlook email, but it's just another way to get immediate information. The other thing is Twitter and Facebook. If everybody can follow us on Twitter and Facebook, you don't have to really socialize on Facebook. But one of the things I would say, the easiest way to communicate for me when it comes to pushing buttons and getting messages out is using Twitter and Facebook, believe it or not. It could take me 5 seconds to put a Twitter message up, take me 10 seconds to put a Facebook message up. So Twitter and Facebook is going to have the same exact messages that are going to come through your Montgomery College Alert text message and your MC Urgent email. And of course, the college website. When that snow is on the ground on a Tuesday and you're sleeping in, if you go to the website, you're going to see that big red bar across the top of the website that basically says, it snowed today, you don't have to come to school. It's basically the same exact message that we're putting out through MC Alert and the MC Urgent email. Another one is MCTV, and as you can look behind us, we have our friends from MCTV here today. The rolling ticker on channel 10 is always going to have the same alert that we put out, whether it be snow and in times of emergency, there could be a lockdown, and we're going to put that up there as well. The response center. Not everybody is connected to the web. Not everybody's watching TV. Not everybody has a computer in front of them. A lot of people still use what's called a telephone. I know it sounds crazy, but people still use a telephone, and the response center is 240-567-5000. Those messages that go out on MC Alert, the exact same message is going to be on the 5000 number, and when you call it, you're going to get somebody to tell you exactly what we're saying in those messages. Of course, our job is to call the local media. So if you watch Channel 4, Channel 7, Channel 5, Channel 9, whichever news organization you watch, we're going to already have communicated with that. Also, the radio stations, whether it be WTOP or Hot 99.5, we communicate with them as well. Not as much in an active emergency situation, more so when it comes to weather-related updates, like school is canceled because of snow. A couple of different things that we can talk about. Mass notification systems. Mass notification systems are, well, they're loud, they flash, and if Carlo, can you help me out here? Do we see any in this building? What you're going to see in, for instance, if we go to the campus center, there are digital screens that are running at the top of a room, digital screens that'll be red letters, and basically what they're saying, like we did when we had the lockdown order, it's going to be the same message as we're ordering for lockdown or shelter in place, but it's also going to have a loudspeaker. So these are, you're not only going to be able to see it, but you're going to actually hear it. It's extremely loud, and they're at all 3 campuses. Another thing is a desktop notification. So if your teacher or if your faculty member is sitting at their smart station and you're being good students and you're not looking at your phone, when we order an emergency, a lockdown, not everybody's going to obviously be on their phone. However, if your teacher is on their smart station, for instance, if this was hooked up to a smart station in class, suddenly we would send a message to that desktop that would read onto the screen. So you sitting in class would also be able to see that emergency message. So really what we're doing is we're trying to utilize as many communication vehicles as we possibly can to communicate in times of emergency. And I guess finally, to end on my communication aspect, we have a lot of ways to communicate, but I would say number one would be just get trained and understand what it means to be in a lockdown situation or a shelter-in-place situation. We're going to have some videos and some more training tools for students. I know there's staff and faculty in this room right now. You guys are privy to the trainings. In the future, the students are going to be privy to the trainings as well. But the best way to keep yourself safe is to be prepared for emergencies, be prepared for an active shooter. Again, we talked about what happened at Ohio State. Just be prepared and be trained, and don't think it's never going to happen here, because it always does, and it's unfortunate that this is the world that we're living in right now. So the best way to protect yourself is to be prepared. So that's all I have, and thank you, and this is Carlo's time.
My name is Carlos Sanchez. I'm the public safety training officer here at the college. I've actually been here for over 16 years now. That seems like a really high number. I started off as a student working in Scone Park campus and public safety, and they've kept me around this long, so I'm still here. To touch on one thing that Marcus said when he was talking about the digital signboards, which basically look like fancy digital clocks that are in classrooms you might see that have red and green lettering. If you'll notice on the walls, there's these big red boxes with strobe lights. Underneath it says alert. So even if you don't have one of those signs in your classroom, if that system gets set off, those strobes will start blinking, and that's going to tell you that something's going on. It also has a built-in speaker, so the fire alarm, if it's a fire alarm, it will come through those speakers and tell you what's happening. So we still do have ways to give you a visual signal that something's going on, even if you don't have the digital signboards that have the scrolling message. So I was given a really good assignment here, and basically it's to take my training, which is about an hour and a half that I do for faculty and staff, whittle it down to like 20 minutes for you guys. So I'm gonna try as best as possible to stay to that timeline. This is why we're here today, okay? This is why we talk about these things. What you're looking at on this chart is the 3 major active shooter incidents that have occurred in the recent past here in this country. These are the 3 that, for whatever reason, really have struck a chord, and as a result, every time that one of these incidents occurs, these always get mentioned. So if you'll notice that second row, minutes of shooting, right? 8.5 minutes, 5 minutes. I mean, you guys have been in here for 20 minutes already, and I'm sure it seems like time is just flying by. So 8 minutes, 5 minutes, it's not a long time. What we see is in these incidents, the window of time in which this incident occurs is about 8 to 10 minutes, okay? Doesn't seem like a long time. But here's really where the problem is, and I want to draw your attention to those bottom 2 columns. Would you say, by looking at this chart, that these numbers are getting better over the span of time? As time has gone by, have these numbers improved? What do you guys think? No, right? Looks pretty bad. As a matter of fact, up until Pulse nightclub in Orlando earlier this year, Virginia Tech was the deadliest active shooter event that's taken place in this country. And so here's really the problem, right? So whenever one of these incidents occurs, we start to have a national conversation, and the national conversation focuses on 2 things. One is the beginning point, right? How do we prevent these from happening? How do we identify these individuals before they commit these heinous crimes? What can we do to stop it? We know that it's going to be some sort of combination of more public safety in schools and colleges and universities, more access to mental health care and training for faculty and staff to be able to identify individuals, some sort of gun policy, whether it's less guns or more guns. It's some sort of combination of that. Unfortunately, we're really no closer to figuring out, or to even really getting to a point where we could say, you know what, we can be pretty sure that this isn't gonna happen, that we're gonna prevent these, right? So the other part of the conversation that we have when these things happen is on the intervention side, the police. How quickly can the police get there? How quickly can the police start intervening to put an end to one of these attacks so that we don't lose as many people, right? Now, the truth is that over the last few years, police and law enforcement have really been working hard to get their policies, to get their response times down. And we're probably about as good as it's gonna get. The issue is these numbers aren't getting better, even though we always talk about these 2 things. And that's because we've kind of found that there's a conversation we're not having. And so that's what we decided to do here at the college, is to start addressing that problem. And you know what that problem is? We don't talk about what those people in those buildings are supposed to do while the police arrive. As a matter of fact, if you think about how quickly someone would call 911, how much time it would take to relay that information, what police response time looks like, most of these incidents are over just about when the police are arriving and starting to intervene, right? In Virginia Tech, for example, the 8 minutes, that's how long it took the police to get to where the shooter was, and as soon as they got there, he ended his own life. So what are people doing in those 8 minutes? And so as a country, I think, we've had a lot of our federal government organizations and agencies start to put out recommendations. Professional associations have put out the recommendations, and this is what we're targeting now. If we can't come up with a solution for how to prevent them, and law enforcement is pretty confident that they've got their end, what are we providing to you that if you ever found yourself in one of these situations, you would actually be able to survive and we wouldn't see such high numbers? So I just want to point out one, usually my presentations have like 5 or 6 of these, but this is a really important guide here. So this is a guide that was put out by the Department of Education over 3 years ago. And this is basically what we use to develop our emergency operations plans. And very interestingly, they had one major comment when it came to active shooter, and that was that if there's an institution or a school that their active shooter response plan is just to say, we're gonna lock down, they're doing it wrong. It's been 3 years that the Department of Education has been saying, if all you do when there's an active shooter is lock down, you're not doing it right. And unfortunately, a lot of places are still doing that lockdown only response. We're moving away from that. And that's why I'm here. So let's talk about something for a second, because you all look like very responsible adults here, I can tell by looking at this room. When a fire alarm goes off, let me ask you a question. When a fire alarm goes off, and this will be interesting because I think there's going to be a divide here. When the fire alarm goes off and it starts ringing, how many of you immediately get up and leave everything behind to leave a building? Okay, there's some people that are lying to me here. How many of you, when that fire alarm starts going off, do you go, oh man, fire alarm, you know what? Maybe it's a false alarm. I'm gonna give this thing like 30 seconds and see if it stops ringing before I have to get up. You'll give it a few seconds, right? And then 30 seconds go by, and you're like, oh, all right, well, let me make sure I got my stuff with me. Let me grab my cell phone, my keys. It's cold outside, let me grab my jacket. Oh, it's raining, I forgot my umbrella. Let me grab my umbrella, right? And we take our time. No one's really got this sense of urgency. So that's interesting to me. That's a really interesting dynamic, because that's kind of the culture that we've developed, right? All it took for you, but I'm interested, the students, do you guys feel that way, or do you actually get up when the fire alarm starts going off? You get up, right? So there's this interesting divide that students, when they're still in school, they sit there, and as they're sitting there and the fire alarm starts going off, they go, oh shucks, here's an interruption to my learning process. This is horrible. I do not want to get up, but I guess that I must, right? Students are really good about getting up and getting out of a building. Us adults, once we've entered the workforce, we're less likely to listen to that alarm immediately. We give it some time. And it's an interesting divide, because we know that the one thing that happens in most public schools are fire drills, right? And so all of us have been in that system where they've trained us. Fire alarm goes off, you get up, you get out, right? But somewhere along the way, as some of us got older and wiser, we started to develop this idea that, you know what, the fire alarm is actually an inconvenience. The first time that I had serious work to do and I had a timeline and I needed to accomplish something, and that fire alarm went off and I got up, got out, stood in the cold for 20 minutes, and then was told that it was a false alarm. The next time that fire alarm went off, I was more hesitant about getting up and leaving because I knew it had been an inconvenience for me. Unfortunately, that's the sort of culture of safety that we're developing, right? We have enough false alarms and we get comfortable and we stop reacting the same way. And so that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to move away from, I told you to do something and it makes you feel safer, but it doesn't actually do anything for you, right? And so that is why we're here working to make sure we pass you this information. So let's get to the actual meat of it. So, quick question. What do you think is going to alert you that there's an active shooter event going on? Marcus talked about some of the things, right? But what else could it be? Gunshots, maybe? People screaming? You could see people running, maybe, right? I'm going to tell you this right now. The only thing that you're really going to be able to rely on is going to be those sensory inputs, what you can see and what you can hear directly in front of you. Yesterday, we talked about Ohio State. It's interesting. I had a training that I gave yesterday, and in the afternoon I did a search on Ohio State University, and I pulled up the news tab on Google, and I put it in chronological order. So 2 hours before, active shooter at Ohio State. An hour after that, it was fatal stabbings. 30 minutes after that one, it was car, right? A car used to injure students. So that was the chronology of it. So depending on which of those time frames you were looking at the news, you were getting a totally different message of what was going on, right? So sometimes everything, news outlets, TV, radio, friends of yours, coworkers, classmates, family members, everything could be, even your own eyes, right? Seeing all that police on campus, everything could be fooling you into thinking that there's something going on somewhere or that there's not something going on somewhere. You have to be able to rely on your own environment and what you see right in front of you and what you hear right in front of you. So that means if I'm in this building and I get a report and Marcus sends out a tweet that says that there's an active shooter on campus, but I don't hear the gunshots here and I don't see anyone screaming, I don't see anyone running, I think it's safe to assume that that shooter is not in my building. Now, I'm gonna take precautions where I am, but I'm not gonna leave this building because I'm gonna assume it's safe, right? And until I hear otherwise from the actual institution, I'm not gonna do anything else. So it's very important, even though as you'll notice there under college technology, we have all this great ways of giving you this information. What you have to rely on are gonna be your own sensory inputs in your environment. Bottom two bullets here. One, we don't use code words. If we send a message out, we're gonna tell you what it is, okay? Because we want to make sure that that message isn't getting lost in translation somewhere because we're trying to be coy about what's going on. And finally, we provide information. What you're gonna learn in a second means that we're giving you an option for how you should respond based on where you are and your comfort level. We're not gonna tell you what to do. We're gonna tell you there's an active shooter on campus, please take the appropriate action of run, hide, or fight, and you're gonna see what those look like. So earlier, Sean and Marcus talked about lockdown. So people always ask, well, what's the difference, right? Because when you listen to the news, they say lockdown, shelter in place, they use the terms interchangeably. Simply this, a lockdown means we are not letting anyone into a building, into an office, onto our campus. A shelter in place means we are inviting people to be indoors because there's some sort of either hazardous material or weather emergency going outside. So for example, there's a tornado. We're gonna ask people to shelter in place because it's safer inside than being outside. Or they're doing construction and they hit a gas main and there's natural gas leaking into the air and the air is hazardous for your health. We're gonna issue a shelter in place so that you can get indoors where the air handlers are filtering that out and you're getting clean air until we can solve that. A lockdown, on the other hand, is different. A lockdown for us means 3 levels of security. The first level is at the campus level. We're gonna stop people from coming onto our campus. That means if you stepped out to go grab a quick bite to eat while this happened, you're not gonna be allowed back on campus. Secondly, we're also gonna lock the buildings as best as we can. We're gonna try to prevent people from getting into your building. But once again, that's not 100%, right? What if someone's leaving and they let someone else into the building? We can't guarantee that. So that's where that third level is so important. And that third level is dependent on you. Getting yourself behind a locked door with solid walls. Did you know that since the year 2000, there have been over 200 active shooter events? So let me ask you a quick question. In those 200 events that have occurred, do you know how many times an active shooter has gone through a locked door to kill someone? 0. A locked door makes you so much safer during one of these incidents. Get yourself 4 solid walls and a locked door, and you are so much safer. If not, you may have to barricade like we saw yesterday at Ohio State, right? Taking desks and chairs and tables and stacking them up in front of a door. Maybe taking your shoe off and wedging it under the door so it's difficult to open, right? Basically creating some sort of barrier aside from the door so it becomes more difficult for someone to gain entry. And if they do gain entry, they're using their hands, which means they're giving you an opportunity to prepare to take some other action. This slide here talks about a 911 call. Very simply, I will tell you this. People sometimes get focused on addresses. If you had to call 911 right now, how many of you know the address to the college? So would you give them the address, or would you tell them what specific building you're in? Because do you know where that address leads them to? So the best thing to do, right, is to give as good information as possible, which means landmarks. I'm at Montgomery College Rockville campus. I'm in the Theater Arts building. Because if you tell them 51 Manakee Street, that's Manakee Street's all the way out there. You're in the middle of a campus. They're getting to the outer edge, right? You want the help to get to you as quickly as possible. Counter, this is the fight part. When we talk about fight, it's always interesting because people always say, well, what exactly do you mean when you say fight? Well, as a last resort, right? We find ourselves in a room face to face with a shooter. What are we going to be able to do to stop a shooter from shooting accurately, right? We could move towards the exits while making noise, throwing objects, or having adults storm the shooters. That sounds easy enough, doesn't it? No, all of you are prepared to do that. Yeah. Well, we have to deal with some myths, right? So let's talk about this for a second. I like to say, listen, shooting a gun isn't difficult. What's difficult is shooting a gun accurately. So what we really have to think about is it possible to interrupt the skill set that's necessary to shoot accurately? I say yes, and we have real life examples of that. Even though police have a high level of skill, they train, they qualify with their weapons every year, they practice all the time, they are very familiar with their weapons. In dynamic events in which police have to use their weapons, we find that their hit rate drops to about 20 to 30%. Why is that? What's going on during those incidents? Well, one, someone may be shooting at the police, right? So that officer can't just stand in the middle of the street and take his time taking careful aim. He might have to take cover. The person that he might have to try to shoot is also not going to stand there like a paper target for the officer, right? So all of a sudden, these dynamic events have so much fluidity to them that it becomes difficult for a police officer to be able to shoot accurately, even though they've been training for years. What's interesting, though, is that what we find from active shooter events is that even though they have a low skill level and little to no training, they tend to have a hit rate of over 50%. Why is that? They don't discriminate. They're focused on that, right? Here's the real thing. You guys would sit in a classroom and hide under a table. Are you really doing anything to protect yourself in that moment? No. That's why those numbers haven't been getting better, because we've been training people to just wait for the police. But the police doesn't get there in time to stop people from dying. So we have to start thinking about what are people doing in those circumstances to protect themselves. If the police is going to take 5 to 6 minutes to get there, guess what? That's 5 or 6 minutes that shooter has to walk around a building and shoot people. So what are you doing? You hiding under a table or under a desk is not preventing anything. That's the difference. So we're giving these active shooters easy targets that aren't moving, aren't taking cover. They're not attacking, right? That's why we have to kind of change the way we look at these situations. So changing that frame of mind, let's look at that question again. If you're face to face with a shooter, what can you do that's going to disturb and distract even the most high-skilled shooter? One is simply noise, right? You start yelling. You guys, obviously, for my earlier question, a lot of you like to stay in buildings that have fire alarms going off for a while. So you may have noticed that after a while, a loud, piercing alarm starts to do things to your body, right? It gets your brain agitated, makes you nervous, your adrenaline starts pumping, your heart rate starts elevating. These are all physical responses to noise. So if someone's aiming a gun at me and I want to distract them a little bit, I might just start yelling at the top of my lungs and see if that's going to throw them off a little bit, right? Movement. How many of you were around for when the DC sniper was going around about 15 years ago? How many of you walked in a zigzag to go get gas or to walk into your house? Right? Yeah, you remember that. Here's the interesting thing. The police was giving us those instructions because even though they suspected a military-trained sniper, they knew that the hardest target for a sniper to hit is a target that unexpectedly moves back and forth, right? If you stay on a linear path, you're easy to hit because they know where you're heading. But if you jerk back and forth, all of a sudden, you're much harder to hit. So even that, right? Just not moving in a straight line makes you harder to hit if you're facing a shooter. Distance. Here's what's really interesting, right? When we start looking at the physics of what a gunfire looks like. If you're standing 25 feet away from me and you're aiming a gun at the middle of my chest, if I can get you to move the barrel of that gun 1 centimeter, up, down, left, or right, you miss me entirely with that shot. 25 feet. At 25 feet, I'm so hard to hit for an untrained shooter. So what do I have to do to make sure that I stay 25 feet away from a person with a gun? All of a sudden, I become infinitely more survivable, right? I'm a harder target to hit. Distractions. So, you all kind of got caught off guard there. You weren't expecting that. A lot of you, I saw your heads tracking the ball to see where it was going. That's a simple distraction. If you're aiming a gun at me or you're coming at me and I do something that throws your attention elsewhere, how accurate are you going to be at shooting at me now, right? A distraction is a really easy thing. What about makeshift weapons? Here's the best part. People always say, well, you know what? I need stuff to protect myself. Guess what? You guys are pretty dangerous when you walk around all the time. You're walking around with cell phones, with keys, water bottles, notebooks, pens, purses, umbrellas, all sorts of projectiles, right? If you're in an office or a classroom setting, staplers, tape dispensers, paperweights, scissors, all sorts of stuff that can do damage. Trust me, not that I've ever experienced it, but I'm pretty sure that if I got hit in the face with a stapler, I would be down for a few seconds, right? And it would be difficult for me to be able to concentrate again. That's really what we're talking about here. So when we talk about fight, this is the stuff we're talking about, right? Here's the interesting thing. You tell me, which one of these 5 things did you not walk into this auditorium already possessing? You had all of them. You just have to be told that it's going to work and you can use it. So it's going to work and you can use it, right? These are the tactics that we're talking about. It's simple things that are going to help you survive. So this doesn't mean if we hear gunshots out here, all of a sudden you guys grab your cell phones and you're like, we're going to go take this guy down. That's not what I'm talking about, right? This is only if you're face to face with someone. We want to provide you survival tactics that go beyond the basic lockdown. Right? So that's barricading the doors, taking cover, concealing yourself somewhere where you're hard to find, swarming someone. If we don't have any weapons, right? Maybe at least 3 or 4 of us jumping on a person, we can take someone down pretty easily. Evading and escaping, just not being there. Removing and securing a weapon. If you did take someone down, you'd want to get the gun away from them. And then contacting law enforcement to let them know, hey, I encountered this person. They were in theater arts building. I was able to distract them by throwing a Nerf ball over there, and they followed it like a little puppy, and I ran out the building. That's the last place I saw them, right? That's what we're talking about here. So I'll leave you with this. We've talked about the hide. We've talked about the fight. This is the run, okay? I tell you, running should always be your first option. You think you hear something, your senses tell you something's not quite right, get out of the building. 98% of these crimes are committed by just one person, a lone wolf scenario, as they call it. Even in those instances when you have more than one person, they stick together, there are no tactics, they're not trained, it's going to be over in 8 minutes. They're not really taking a long time to say, okay, well, I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to make them all go towards you, and then you're going to be over there waiting. We don't see those sorts of tactics, because these are not trained folks. Finally, I'll leave you with the last bullet point, which is, in all active shooter events, we don't lose people who are running away from the location of a shooter. We lose people who are just sitting there waiting to get shot. What we want to do is encourage you guys to be able to feel like you have control and you can take actions that actually would help you survive.